Good evening. How are you? I'm doing a sit and talk because where I am, it's been raining all day. They forecast it. They don't usually get the duration this accurate, but they did. They said it would be this way today. I thought there were a couple of things that would be worth remarking about that you may be considering. One, of course, is the Middle East. What does that mean? Has Trump done something great? Well, that remains to be seen. And let me talk about it. He described this in his characteristic way as the new Middle East, declaring the war on Gaza is over. It's not true. The agreement that they have is only for a ceasefire, which means there is no agreement, and the elements of what it is going forward have not been decided upon. But let's talk about the good news for the day. The release of 20 hostages is a wonderful result. The sorrow is for all those who died in captivity in the last couple of years. And if you ran through the list as I did of the 20, you'll notice that an overage of them are younger, which makes sense to survive. And they were involved in that first site of the attack, and I believe it was October the 7th. So the release of 20 hostages is a wonderful result. But what made this possible? It's got to be in the back of your mind. And I'm pretty sure we'll hear that in the next several days. So, for example, we know about Qatar, and we saw our Secretary of State sitting with them, and there's been pushback that they would be able to train in Idaho. And this appears to me to be one visible element of an array of quids for quos to make this event happen. Now, Trump is the master of the deal, but he's not a good deal maker. There's a disproportionate in what he should get and what he does get, and he's more interested in how it appears, both the horrible things he does, as well as the things he thinks are well done, which he does incompletely or badly, notwithstanding his PR about it. So what did Israel release? Israel released almost 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees. I was very surprised to learn, and maybe you knew about this, that 250 of those released were under death sentences. Now, let's talk about the warning about what's next. And there are a couple of things that I think are interesting and important. One warning is, as I said, this is a ceasefire. So there's a chance for treachery ahead, but there's also a chance for success ahead. Knowing the gang that we're dealing with, Netanyahu, Trump, and so forth, I would expect at least a moderate amount of treachery, if not a complete failure. So one of the first questions is, will Hamas disarm? Now, there's talk about it. This went forward with some sort of tentative agreement, but there wasn't an agreement. There's like an agreement to agree, which means nothing. So who will pay to rebuild Gaza? Now, at one point, our boy Trump said, well, he sort of make it like, I don't know, a big casino. I mean, he's crazy. He's like the Denver of the East. So, and who will govern Gaza? And there's talk that one of the persons on that would be Blair, who is a former prime minister. I don't know how that works. I would imagine that the resistance might be great both from Muslim and Palestinian and Israeli, but we'll find out. Now, after Trump made a victory lap, talking to the parliament, part of which was like a normal campaign speech for him, they went to Egypt, and he was received like a prince. So he must have enjoyed that. And in Egypt, many signed a document. Now, the ones who signed the document were Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar. But nobody said, at least as of this moment, when I'm speaking to you in the evening, nobody's told me what the content of that document is. I bet it's all business. Now, who did not sign? Israel didn't sign. Hamas did not sign. So what's in that document may not involve any burden on Israel or Hamas, because it's the kind of deal that Qatar was involved in to have training camps in Idaho. You know they can't keep secrets. By this time tomorrow, we'll probably know exactly what happened. Now, Israel did withdraw within Gaza for the ceasefire. When do they go back? See, that's the trick here. So after they've gotten the hostages out, or they're just going to return to position one, which is not the concept they've been talking about, but watch this page. And when I say watch this page, I think of how newspapers have changed over the last 10 years. It was true for a very long time. Americans didn't want to read foreign news, so people wouldn't advertise on those pages. And I'm talking about obviously a print version, but I think it's still true that people think that that's the default. But we have so many stories that are international. It tells us something, I think, about the chaos that's enveloping the entire planet. So there's so many things that can go wrong. And then, of course, in Israel, Trump suggested that they should pardon Netanyahu. I'm sure he liked that. And, nobody mentioned maybe that Trump got a copy of a letter from Netanyahu favoring him to receive the Nobel Prize. So, I mean, these guys, there's nothing pure about any of these guys, and the notions of corruption and so forth are rampant. Turning closer to home, I continue to see some pushback against these occupation forces that Trump is spreading. And they're getting uncomfortable about shooting civilians who are doing nothing except protesting, sometimes in costumes and so forth. So we'll see how that works. We don't know yet what the Seventh Circuit is going to do with what's happening in Oregon, Portland, and we are hopeful that the other appeal in Chicago will go as well or better. So that's another thing to watch. In New York tonight, Letitia James, who is still the Attorney General for the state of New York, she attended a rally for Mamdani, who is running for mayor, and she gave a real stem winder. Of course, she's also in the mix. So it's heavily covered, and she's talking about who is going to become the next mayor of New York, and she seemed to be fully supported there. But one of the elements of the prosecution about her, besides it being vindictive and selective and whether one would bring such a case if they had the hard evidence, and Abby Lowell, whom I told you I have great respect for, his talents and him as a person, and as a kind person, and as a brave and courageous person, he's representing her, and the charge is now being disclosed somewhat. There was a modest house in Norfolk, and there was a second home rider on it which said to keep it for personal use for 1 year. And the argument against Letitia James is that they say, allowed 3 people, a family of 3, to live in the position. So the representation she made is the basis of this prosecution. It's a kind of thin gruel to make a criminal case out of. And if that is the entire case, as a prosecutor, I might bring people into a room and scare the hell out of them, but I don't know that I would prosecute them for something like this. But again, I'm getting second or third hand, like you and everybody else, information about what the prosecution is about her. The No King Day is catching fire, it seems to me. A lot of people who normally wouldn't feel comfortable going, and I'm talking about physical burden to get from point A to point B and hanging around for hours in a crowd. But it does appear that this is going to be an even bigger demonstration, and hopefully it'll whip some of the people who are sitting on their hands into action. I was very pleased, perhaps you were too, to hear Obama speak in the terms of what's going on and why it's important and how sacrifice of a certain sort makes sense. You know, I talk about Gandhi, as do many others, as the standard when dealing with excessive force, that peace is almost the only way that you can compete. Very different than some models of revolution, obviously. And We can't overlook the fact that Gandhi paid with his life, shot to death. He wanted a united India of both Muslim and Hindu, and this was not to be. It ended in separate states, as you may know. So, those are a couple of thoughts I have today. I'll do my homework and see if I have anything to add tomorrow. And I hope you have a good evening. Sorry to get back to you so late, but I was representing the abused and misunderstood writing things in my cases. So I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.